Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life and just little things that I've learned as I've grown into the person that I am today. And today, I did not just bring one meditation book. No, I brought two meditation books today. So I thought that we would check them both out and see what they have to say to us today. See what the universe is saying to us, or your higher power, if you so believe. I have not read From the Journey to the Heart book in quite a while, so I think I'm kind of leaning towards that today. But I did want to check and see what the meditation is for the language of letting go today, because this is my favorite meditation book of life. So let's get in here and see what it says for October 22nd today. October 21st was a long one. Okay, that was financial responsibility. Holding your own, October 22nd. Well, maybe we should start with this one. Maybe we should do one from each. That would be good, wouldn't it? Okay. This one is long too, though. Yeah, it's like a whole page. Okay. October 22nd, holding your own. Trust yourself. Trust what you know. Sometimes it is hard to stand in our own truth and trust what we know, especially when others would try to convince us otherwise. In these cases, others may be dealing with issues of guilt and shame. They may have their own agenda. They may be immersed in denial. They would like us to believe that we do not know what we know, that they would like us to not trust ourselves. They would prefer to engage us in their nonsense. We don't have to forfeit our truth or our power to others. That is codependency. Believing lies is dangerous. When we stop trusting our truth, when we repress our instincts, when we tell ourselves there must be something wrong with us for feeling what we feel or believing what we believe, we deal a deadly blow to ourself and our health. This is such a great meditation. When we discount that important part of ourselves that knows what is the truth, we cut ourselves off from our center. We feel crazy. We get into shame, fear, and confusion. We can't get our bearings when we allow someone to pull the rug from under us. This does not mean that we are never wrong, but we are not always wrong. Be open, stand in our truth, trust what you know, and refuse to buy into denial, nonsense, bullying, or coercion that would like to take you off course. Ask to be shown the truth clearly, not by the person trying to manipulate or convince you, but by yourself, your higher power, and the universe. Today I will trust my truth, my instincts, and my ability to ground myself in reality. I will not allow myself to be swayed by bullying, manipulating, games, dishonesty, or people with peculiar agendas. I think this is such a fantastic meditation. And it's interesting, like in my head, I'm going back to like, periods 20, 30 years ago, childhood, different times in my life, relationships and stuff like that. I'm thinking about this. And then, it's interesting because I was talking to a friend of mine on the phone the other night, and we were talking about truth, and she said something to me about, how you always, you know the truth, but like, you almost kind of get convinced by other people that maybe there's another truth, but you know the truth to your own story, right? But then you start kind of like listening to what other people say. And it's so interesting because in therapy right now, I'm doing this trauma narrative over being bullied. And I know that there's probably a lot of people that, are like, let me kind of explain to you how I even got to this idea, right? Well, my therapist had suggested it to me about working on this whole bullying narrative thing. So with my previous therapist, we were in a session one time, and I've shared this story several times. And he said something to me. I was talking about being bullied as a kid and whatever. And that carrying over into my adult life and, and whatnot. And he said, has anybody ever suggested to you that maybe you have suffered post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of being bullied for so many years, so consistently, like every single day? And, I'm not, like, huge on labels. I think that, or diagnoses, I think that, they're important to understand ourselves and to get the appropriate treatment for. I think that for me, I can't tell anybody else, but for me, that's why it's important to me. Not just to list off a bunch of, like, this is everything that I have kind of thing, right? But in that moment, what that did for me was, it was the first time that anybody had really acknowledged, like, really, truly acknowledge. I mean, I'd had a lot of people that said, I'm sorry that happened to you. I'd even had people that had, come to me and apologize that had done it to me, had bullied me when I was growing up. I'd shared the story by that time so many times that, people would, like, relate to my story, and they'd say, oh my God, I went through the exact same thing, on and on and on. But that was the first time that anybody had really, I don't know how to explain it, that anybody had really seen me for how horrible it was, that what I had gone through. The fact that I would have a therapist, okay, suggest to me that there was a possibility that I was suffering from PTSD as a result of what the bullying that I had gone through in my youth that carried over into adulthood, was the first time anybody had seen me in the way that I felt like I needed to be seen in that moment, or seen for that situation. The extreme pain that I had gone through all that. And that was paramount to me. It wasn't about getting a diagnosis of PTSD. It wasn't about all that. It was about that in that moment, that it was paramount to me that somebody had actually, like, they could validate, wow, like, you went through so much pain. Not just, I'm sorry that happened to you. A lot of people would say, get over it. You're old enough. Why are you still dealing with that? Whatever, right? But that it was so significant in my life that a therapist was suggesting that possibly I had PTSD as a result of that. And, you know, what we know about PTSD is that PTSD is a lens that you look through the world. Something that has happened to you is, you know, this is your reaction to it, and that this is now how you look through the world. Okay, so I know a lot of people that are in the sister programs, the 12-step programs called Al-Anon, which is a program for friends and family members of alcoholics and addicts, but primarily alcoholics. I have friends of mine that have been in Al-Anon for 20, 30 years. They haven't, like, seen their alcoholic parent. I mean, maybe their parent died, like, 20 years ago. They continue to go to Al-Anon. I have friends of mine that left their spouse that was an alcoholic 15 or 20 years ago. They continue to go to Al-Anon. And the reason why is because they look at the world through the lens of somebody that had an alcoholic in their life. Somebody that was codependent on an alcoholic, possibly. Somebody that took care of an alcoholic, or somebody that was greatly affected by an alcoholic. And it really started making me think, when all these things were coming together, that I still look through the lens as this 6-year-old kid, 5-year-old kid, 7-year-old kid that was bullied way back in the day. I still look at it. I still react to the world that way. I still respond to the world that way. And whether I am passive and just let stuff happen to me, or whether I stand up for myself, or even feeling like I even have a choice in all of that, right? And so this whole idea of, you know, like, when people would say to me, you just need to get over it, like, it's been so long ago. Those were like my foundation years, you know, of growing up. And my foundation years were grounded in fear. And so working through this trauma narrative has been really, really powerful for me, because it's kind of like taking me back to this period where it wasn't just about the bullying. It was the first time that I started to believe what other people said. Other people would say things about me, and I think to myself in my head, there's no truth to that whatsoever. Like, I know who I am. I know what I've done. I know my life, right? Like, and they would completely make up stories about things that had never even occurred, or take my words and twist them into a way that they were something that I had never said. And I'm talking about in 2nd and 3rd grade. You don't know how to, like, deal with that, how to work against that. And what happened, I think, over time was that enough people did it to me and enough people said it to me that I started questioning myself. You know, it's like, you know, when the saying that, like, if you tell yourself a lie long enough, you start to believe it? Well, I think the opposite is true as well. That when people start to tell a lie about you long enough, there's a part of you that starts to question it. And so, like, not just about those specific things that they would say, but specific things of my self-worth and my value, and that I wasn't good enough and I wasn't lovable. And I think that this is what leads to these horrible events that happens in the world today, where what happens with these kids that are bullied today, because I think that they start believing that. I think they start believing that they're not good enough, they're not lovable. You know, and I'm so entirely grateful. You know, I have parents that ask me all the time, what can I do for my kid that's coming out or whatever? I'm like, love them. Just love them, you know? Love them as you would love any other child, right? Like, why would you not? And, you know, I'm so entirely grateful that I came home to 2 loving parents that, you know, allowed me to, you know, put on shows and be my, you know, weird, extravagant, you know, eccentric self, you know, at 7 years old, and let me express that at home. And I'm so grateful for that, you know? I'm so grateful for, I don't know, just the love and the acceptance that I got, not just from my parents, but from, at a time that was not popular, you know? Not just from my parents, but from my aunt and uncle, from my grandparents, from, you know, family, friends, that just, you know, like, in retrospect, when I've talked to some of them and been like, did you ever think that I was gay? And they were like, oh, we knew you were good. I mean, we knew that at like 3 or 4 years old. I mean, you were putting on shows in the living room, you know, and And so, you know, and whatever, and that's stereotypical, right? Like, that's stereotypical. But, you know, they thought that, you know, at that time, maybe that's what was going to happen. And so I think about this meditation where it talks about, you know your own truth. Don't buy into what somebody is telling you, because they do not know them. They do not know you better than you do. You know yourself. You know the truth. And just because somebody says something about you and puts it out there in the world does not make it fact, you know? One of my favorite lines from any movie in the entire world is from The Contender, and it's at the very end of the movie, and if you've never seen the movie with Joan Allen, it's fantastic. And it also has one of my favorite lines, well, we'll get to this in just a second, but at the end of it, the whole movie is about, she's going to become a Supreme Court justice, and these pictures come out from college that allege that she was in this, like, scandalous situation. She knows that there was no truth to the pictures. The pictures were doctored. She knows that. She knows that. She never addresses it. She never once addresses the pictures. She just stays calm. She just stays still. She gets the position. She does. If she doesn't, she doesn't. Well, at the end, it's announced that she gets the position. And that's not really what the movie's about, so it's not ruining the movie for you. But at the end, she gets the position, and they announce it. And the president, who I think is played by Jeff Bridges, comes along, and she's running, and he stops her, like running, like jogging. And he says to her, you know, it came out that those pictures were doctored. And he looks at her and he goes, well, you knew that all along. And she said, yeah. And he said, why didn't you ever say anything about it? Like, why didn't you ever answer their questions about it? And she says, because it was never theirs to ask in the first place. It's such a powerful line to me. It was never theirs to ask in the first place. It was never theirs to talk about. There are some things that are so personal that are really nobody else's business to even address, to talk about, to speculate about anything, you know? And there's no reason to address it when you know the truth. You know the truth, you know? There's a lot of things I will never address because I know the truth. There's no reason to. You know, there's no reason whatsoever to address it. It was interesting because, just on kind of a side note, but my husband not too long ago, he, like, put up some, like, picture on Instagram, and it was for, like, this, like, aesthetic service that he had gotten and whatever. And somebody sent me this thing that said, because I talk a lot on my drama channel about, you know, non-disclosures, FTC guidelines, and things like that. And somebody had sent me something where somebody had said, even Alex's husband doesn't disclose. Well, I know that my husband discloses. You know, he doesn't, it's not like he does a million sponsorships, but when he does get things, he knows appropriately how to disclose. And so I said something to him about it. I said, can you come out, because it wasn't sponsored, he paid for it, and I knew that. And I said, can you just make a statement and say, like, I didn't, you know, pay for this or whatever? And he goes, absolutely not. And I go, why not? And he goes, why am I going to address something that there's no bearing in truth to begin with? He goes, I'm not going to address it. And I said, okay. And he goes, why would I address something because somebody thinks that I did something that I didn't do? He goes, this is absolutely buffoonery. And, you know, I think that goes along with knowing that you know your truth. You know who you are, right? Like, why would you address one person coming out and saying that my husband didn't disclose a sponsorship correctly just because that person's trying to get to me when it wasn't a sponsorship to begin with, so why would he have disclosed it? You know? It's like, and it made perfect sense to me in that moment. But I think there's a lot of people out there that want to steal your story from you. It's happened to me since I was 5 or 6 years old, you know? I've said a lot of times in videos of mine that I feel like my coming out experience was stolen from me because so many people ridiculed me with being gay in high school and in middle school and elementary school that I had such a hard time coming to terms with the fact that I was gay, that when I finally did come out and I said, you know, this is who I am, I felt like somebody had stolen that story from me 10 years before that, 5 years before that, 3 years before that. You know, it didn't feel like it was my story. It was hard to even, like, own it. And so, you know, I think that this is important. And when this meditation goes in here and it talks about owning your own truth, a lot of what it's talking about, I mean, today, it's interesting because, hold on a second, let me get to the meditation. It's interesting because today, you know, we have all these terms that we use, like narcissism and gaslighting and things like that. But, you know, when I was in high school and I was growing up and all these people were doing these things to me, and I'm not saying that they were those things, I'm just saying that we didn't have language to use to describe these things. It was just shitty behavior is what it was. And so when it goes in here and says, you know, to this whole thing, it says, trust yourself, trust what you know. Sometimes it is hard to stand in our own truth and trust what we know, especially when others would try to convince us otherwise. In these cases, others may be dealing with issues of guilt and shame. That's not my issue. What other people's issues are in their life, and I feel for them, okay? Whatever their issues are of loss or grief or misery or unhappiness, that's not an excuse for them to try to rewrite my history, you know? It wasn't then and it isn't now, and it isn't for you either, you know? Just because somebody else is feeling guilty about somebody. It's like, you know, when I've been in my fair share back in the day, you know, of using stuff, bad relationships. And, you know, and I'm talking like, you know, ones that maybe lasted a couple months or something. But, you know, like when you're arguing and like, you know that person did something and it's like, they say something to the effect of, well, like they try to turn it on you. I mean, today we call that gaslighting, but back in the day, I didn't know what that was. I don't even know today if it's necessarily gaslighting, but it made me start questioning, like, am I going crazy? Like, are they crazy or am I crazy? Are they lying? And then you never know, right? And then years later, you look back on it and you go, oh, I wasn't crazy. They were lying. Their mission was to take me down. Their mission was to, like, really hurt me, right? Like, that was part of their mission. You know, and once they achieved that, then they moved on to the next person. It's, you know, and that has been something that I've been dealing with since elementary school. I mean, it's really like the bullies never change. When I was like when I was 5 years old, you know, or 6, 7 years old in first and second grade, you know, that was the whole thing. I knew that, right? I knew like once they had done their job, they were going to move on to the next person. You know, I knew that if they got a response out of me, they were going to keep on going. They were going to keep on going. They were going to keep on going. And so it's a lot about, it doesn't really matter what they do. It's a lot about knowing your own truth, you know, knowing who you are inside and being true to that inside, being true to who you are inside and not allowing somebody else to take that. You have one life. You have one story. You have one life story. That is nobody else's to take. And you don't even owe it to them to address it at all, you know? Do I think that from time to time it's important for us, like the meditation says, to take accountability for our actions? 100%. Do I think it's right, it's time to, or it's, you know, there's appropriate times to right wrongs? Absolutely 100%. Do I think it's important to, you know, apologize for mistakes that you've made and make amends for people that you've hurt? 100%. You know, and honestly, it really helps us more than it helps the other person, you know? It's like when they talk about forgiveness is really for ourselves, it's really not for that other person, you know? And that's so true. And it's really about the growth and the change that you go through or that I've gone through, you know, to get to the other side. But you don't owe everybody out there or even anybody out there complete freedom to your life and your life story. You own that. And you know your life story, you know? And you know, if you get to the point where you feel like somebody's saying something about you, go, no. Okay, I'm not going to have somebody say that about me. That's incorrect, you know? And if you find yourself having to say that all the time, you know, I mean, I do think it's important from time to time to be like, okay, check the truth. Is there any truth in what they're saying? And if there's not, you know, I mean, that's also another part of like toxicity and setting boundaries. Like, I do not have people in my life today that treat me that way. I just don't. I don't have people that think that my life and the story of my life and any part of the story of my life is, you know, is a joke to them or is, you know, a belittlement to them, you know? I mean, especially the big issues in my life when it comes to things like my marriage, you know, or my sobriety or my relationship with family members or my mother, you know, or things, tragic events that have happened in my life or my relationship with my dogs, you know, or my relationship with my friends, things like that. I don't take those things lightly, and neither should you, you know? And so I don't even, I pay those people no mind, you know, in my life today. And I've had people, you know, in the past that have really tried to like hurt I mean, growing up in this whole bullying mentality, right? What I have learned is that, I mean, I learned this in 2nd and 3rd grade, that people that want to hurt you will take those things that are most vital to you, the things that are most important to you, and they will try to use them against you. They will try to rewrite those things against you because they know that those things are important to you, and they try to do that. I learned that in 2nd grade, you know? I mean, it took me till I was 45 to continue to learn that, you know? I think I finally learned it about 45. But don't let somebody else take your story from you. You know, at the end of the day, you got to remember, you know your truth. You know who you are. You know the truth to your story. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to come out and tell all that. And you don't always have to right all the wrongs. And you don't always have to prove somebody right or prove somebody wrong, you know? It's your choice whether you do that or not. It's your choice at the end of the day where you go, I'm going to give energy to this or I'm not. And that's one of my main things this year is like I'm really looking at in everything in my life, you know? What am I giving energy to? Like where, like I only have so much energy in a day. What do I choose to give it to, you know? Do I choose to get into a petty fight with a friend of mine over something that doesn't matter? I don't really do that today in my life anyway, but I'm just using that as an example. You know, do I choose to do that, or do I choose to have fun with my friend, you know? Do I, you know, choose to spend time with my husband and my dog and do things that make me happy? Do I choose to make videos, or do I choose to just stay in the problem instead of the solution, as my best friend says? And today I want to stay in the solution. Today I want to be happy, joyous, and free, you know? And part of that is knowing my truth and knowing my story, you know, and knowing what has got me to where I'm at today. And don't ever let anybody take your story away from you, you know. That's your story. That's your life. You have one life story. You have one, and it's yours. It's not somebody else's to write. They can write their own story, and if their story is attempting to rewrite yours, then their story is full of misery. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I love you guys, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.